Coming up.
How vulnerable are satellites and infrastructure relying on satellites with potential nuclear explosion in low Earth orbit?
The bluster of Putin. We've ignored his bluster at our own peril. He has a proven track record of comfort with war of attrition, where he sacrifices his own equipment and his own people's lives. So is there what would be a prudent defense response? I think we've got to do better than just hope that such an event doesn't take place.
And if it's just shared on a need-to-know basis, it would facilitate an exchange.
The problem with that is that whenever the government has a need-to-know basis, they always determine that you don't need to know.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
The first questions will be for MDA through you. Since the revelation of Putin's willingness to use nuclear weaponization of space, has any entity from the federal government approached you to discuss this?
To discuss that topic? No. No one has approached us to discuss that topic. Various intelligence and security agencies from the federal government do approach us and work with us on national security issues and our ability to ensure that we have very secure operations, both domestically and in orbit. But on that topic, no.
What about contacts you may have in the United States? Has anyone shared anything with you on this topic?
No, I think in general, like people might generally talk about those things in an unclassified manner at conferences and the like, but no.
How vulnerable are satellites and infrastructure relying on satellites with potential nuclear explosion in low Earth orbit?
I think that satellites are susceptible to any form of explosion in orbit. I think that most nations are working hard to ensure that we don't do that. I think that space and counter space efforts in counter space, there's lots of bluster that's out there, but I think that if folks go around exploding things in orbit, that it does just as much harm to their own assets as it would to an adversary, because of the debris that would be created from that's in those orbital paths. You risk just as much your own operations as the next guy. So I think people, bluster a fair bit on these topics, but in general, the business of messing around with somebody else's satellite capability would be more subtle than causing explosions.
What should the federal government do to protect satellites from this new threat on the horizon?
I think that in general, the Canadian forces with their space operations need to continue to work very effectively with their allies. It seems that is the case and that it is increasing. There is also the introduction of what's called a commercial integration cell that will occur in Canada that also exists in the United States as an example, whereby those commercial entities that operate significant military capability, not military capability, but space capability like NDDN or Telesat, who are here today, would work weekly, regularly, with the military on coordinating our space activities and ensuring that we're mutually aware of threats and taking actions ourselves and with allies to be able to protect those threats.
Okay, in the Financial Times, a leaked U.S. report indicated that China is developing a sophisticated cyber weapon that deny, control, and hijack foreign satellites. So potentially, China could take over satellites and gather data without our knowledge, or rendering them useless by disabling us access. From your expertise, how credible is this a threat to Canadian national security, if indeed it does persist?
In my remarks, I made the comment about the importance of us getting through the process of security clearances so that Canadian industry could engage properly with the Department of Defense about the highly classified nature of the threats that are going on in space. So I would have limited awareness of that because we have spent over 3 years engaging with the Government of Canada to try to get the necessary security clearances of government personnel and appropriate industry personnel so that we could have conversations to discuss the types of topics that you are mentioning. That will come soon someday, but the bureaucracy is very bogged down in their ability to get the necessary clearances so that we can have these conversations. However, I do think it's a highly plausible situation whereby, in terms of just general knowledge of electronic warfare measures and the ability to jam and interfere with electronic signals, that it would make sense that people would have capability to be able to interfere with satellites, and we definitely pay attention to that when we build and protect them today.
With respect to RadarSat additions, what progress are you aware of that's being made in the adding more satellites to the constellation?
Yeah, RadarSat Constellation mission has 3 satellites in it. MDA built those and launched them in June of 2019. The government, as of last October, has announced an additional program called RadarSat Plus, where as a minimum there will be one additional satellite will be procured to add to that constellation to provide resiliency and start the initiating studies to be able to plan the replacement of RadarSat Constellation to ensure continuity. In addition, firms like MDA, back to my comments on collaborating commercially, MDA has invested over $400 million over the last few years to build Chorus, our 4th generation of RadarSat-capable satellites, which is will be owned and operated by MDA, and would provide an additional commercial service that, if the government wanted to leverage that in partnership with industry, they could do so as well to provide additional resiliency to Canada's radar surveillance capability.
Have you seen any movement on the part of the federal government to start moving this ahead?
The RadarSat Plus procurement, yes. Talking to us about procurement of commercial services, not yet.
Okay. For Telesat, there have been incidents where airline Wi-Fi was used in an attempt to hack into avionics so they could take control of the aircraft. How much of the price for an airline in-air Wi-Fi service goes to cybersecurity, and is Telesat, has it ever been attacked by such a cyber incident?
That's an important question. Unfortunately, Ms. Galan has not left you any time to answer it, but hopefully you can circle back in on that.
Mr. Kelly. Thanks. Okay. I'd like to start, Mr. Greenlee, just by unpacking a little bit of your testimony in your opening round and in response to some of the questions from Mrs. Gallant. You said that you were somewhat dismissive of the threat of a nuclear explosion in space under the thought that any such event disrupts all sides and that it's not possible to just target an adversary. But we've ignored you characterize it as the bluster of certain people, and we're talking about the bluster of Putin. We've ignored his bluster at our own peril. He has a proven track record of comfort with war of attrition, where he sacrifices his own equipment and his own people's lives. So, is there what would be a prudent defense response? I think we've got to do better than just hope that such an event doesn't take place.
To be honest, I think that was me expressing my personal opinions before. I think that the topic that we're into here is certainly one for the military. My previous comments about us needing to make sure that we get the appropriate clearances so that industry and the military can collaboratively talk about these things is essential. And I don't feel I would be informed enough at this time.
Okay, good. Now that takes us to the first ask in your response so the absence of security clearance, does that leave you with more or less just being able to, where would you get your information if you don't have that security clearance?
You're left with unclassified information that the general public would have from the media or participation in conferences. Often what happens with security clearances is that the system has been established whereby if you have a contract whereby you need to be secure, then you can get the appropriate clearance. However, in this case, we need to have the clearances so we can have the conversations to develop the capabilities to then get the contract, and the government has to do things differently.
Okay, so how will Canada ensure domain awareness in the Arctic when RadarSat reaches its end of life? We've had testimony at this committee and an Auditor General report that show there's a gap coming. How can we prevent this coverage gap?
I think that RadarSat Plus will help by adding additional satellite capability into the constellation. So you're going to get some resiliency from that. Leveraging commercial services. Which
If I may, I've only got a really short time left.
Sorry.
What about non-maritime domain awareness? Does your company, or is there technology available that can give us? We've heard of huge gaps in awareness in the Arctic.
Right.
Are there solutions at hand commercially?
Yes, there are solutions for non-maritime domain awareness, yes. Our Cora system, for example, which combines what's called C-band and X-band, two different types of synthetic aperture radar, greatly enhances our capability to do non-maritime domain awareness.
As we now are seemingly moving away from the International Space Station towards that commercialization of a space domain, what are the wider implications that would have on diplomacy, and what can we do to increase or ease that tension that we feel here on the ground up in space?
I think that in the commercial space stations, they're going to be very international. So a lot of different countries are going to want to get access to those. And so they'll be like, large commercial collaborative industrial parks. But if we look at the moon on the Artemis program, we've had 36 countries now. We had 6 countries collaborate on the International Space Station. The Artemis Accords, we now have had 36 countries sign up with the United States to collaborate on the moon. And so the actual level of geopolitical collaboration on the next hardest problem, it used to be the hard problem was to have the space station. Now the hardest problem to go and live and work on the moon. And the amount of participation globally now to have 36 countries working together is tremendous. We also have another group.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave the answer there. Thank you. Mr. Bazan, 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair. Thanks to our witnesses for being here. Mr. Greenlee, you talked about the Chorus satellite constellation. That's in service already?
Sorry, no, that's in development. It'll be launched in the fourth quarter of 2025.
Okay, and it's commercially available when it does launch?
Yes.
It's considered an ISR platform?
Yes.
Who would be able to use it outside of the government of Canada if it's an ISR?
We will have customers on our current RadarSat 2, which we own and operate. We would have customers in 25 countries around the world. So defense and intelligence agencies around the world would contract us to provide them with surveillance.
Would that include near peer and adversarial nations?
It includes countries that we have export permits from the government of Canada to deliver a service to.
Okay. So that would be screened, and there's a safety check there.
Absolutely, all the time.
Affairs.
Yep, and it changes based on the geopolitical situation.
Okay. Both of you have talked about security clearances, both from Telesat and from MDA. Is the government chronically overclassifying information to make it difficult for Canadians and for Canadian industry to understand the needs and threats that we're facing?
No, I don't think so. I think that the level of classification of information is appropriate. It's just making sure that the people that need access to that are cleared and approved.
But that also provides more of a bureaucratic slowdown and red tape to get people cleared in a timely manner, which we hear over and over again, that not just Canadian, not just industry representatives, but also people that work for the government of Canada, including the Canadian Armed Forces, can't get their security clearances. Ms. Beck.
Yeah.
So I think in some instances, there could be more open dialogue with the parties that are, supplying the services, and if it's just shared on a need-to-know basis, it would facilitate an exchange.
The problem with that is that whenever the government has a need-to-know basis, they always determine that you don't need to know. It's the easy way out. So my question then comes down to is you both have got national defense contracts already. How was those security clearances that you had for those projects not continued forward on future contracts?
So we do have. So we were asked to get security clearances 2 years ago, and they were actually fast tracked for Telesat. We believe they were. It was never indicated why we needed these top security clearances. We were told that we would be consulted on just shortly. That consultation never came. We're still waiting on the sharing of information. We believe that it was associated with the creation of the commercial integration cell activity work that is about to launch, frankly. So we do have clearances, and we're waiting actually to have these very open dialogues, exchanges of information pertaining to the security, at least of satellite communications aspects.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan.